Well, let's get some analysis now with Chris Doyle in London. He's a Middle East commentator and director at the Council of Arab-British Understanding. Great to have you back with us, Chris. Can we begin with this new damning report that's been released by Amnesty International, a report that's almost 300 pages long, which outlines extensively the events since October 2023, in fact, essentially saying that Israel is, in fact, committing genocide across the enclave. The report was handed down by Agnes Callamard, who we know was previously a special rapporteur for the United Nations. What's your response to what Amnesty is saying, and do you believe that a genocide is being committed in Gaza right now?
Amnesty International is the first human rights agency to come out, the first major one to come out and say that what Israel is doing in Gaza is a genocide. I have had a look at large parts of that report, and it's both damning and distressing in its detail about events that nobody would have wanted to have seen happening. And it joins a larger and larger number of people, genocide experts, Holocaust experts, human rights lawyers, who have said that the case that Israel is conducting genocide in Gaza is growing or overwhelming. And to remind viewers as well, of course, that even as early as January, the end of January, that the International Court of Justice determined that there should be provisional measures imposed upon Israel, that Israel should adhere to these, for fear that a genocide may be being perpetrated against the Palestinians in Gaza. And those provisional measures are done whilst the court makes its own determination, its own ruling as to whether this does constitute genocide. So Amnesty doing this, I think, highlights the really horrific policies of many governments, above all in Europe and the United States, and they're failing to hold Israel to account. Because even if you don't call this genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity, I mean, the evidence for that is absolutely overwhelming. But personally, I believe that bar, that very high legal bar for genocide, has actually been very sadly and awfully reached.
Yes, and Agnes Callamard, the head of Amnesty International, would agree with you, citing several examples of Israel breaching the Genocide Convention. Why is it then, in the face of such damning evidence, that countries in the West, who are normally very quick to point out atrocities committed in other conflict zones across the world, why is it then that those very same countries are reluctant to do so in this case?
Well, it's a feature of world politics, isn't it, that you do not wish to challenge an ally. Russia, for example, never really challenged what the Syrian regime was doing in Syria, or whether or not it agreed with it or not. So it's often a feature of geopolitics. The United States is obviously a very close ally with the State of Israel, and if it was to accuse it of genocide or even war crimes, then it would obviously have great impact upon the nature of that relationship. The over $22 billion of weapons that the United States has given to Israel over the last 14 months, that couldn't have happened, that they would have to completely rearrange and redevelop that relationship. It would mean that they would probably not have dealings with Israeli ministers and Israeli government officials, and could even impose sanctions. And for political reasons, they don't want to do that. So yes, and I think the rest of the world sees this hypocrisy. They're going to argue with many European and states and the United States that, frankly, they don't have a leg to stand on if they come to them in future and start talking about human rights and international law. And that's what troubles me in the long run about this, that you've got the immediate suffering of Palestinians in Gaza, which must be ended. But where does a rules-based order lie after all of this, if the whole world sees that it doesn't really count in the event of a probable genocide, that key actors, including Security Council permanent members, do absolutely nothing to stop it? They can't even get a ceasefire, let alone hold Israel accountable for the crimes that it's accused of committing.
Okay, Chris Doyle, let's leave it there for now. But thank you, as always, for joining us on the program and sharing with us your thoughts.
Pleasure.